Well, we had another silly situation where I've recorded a video 40 minutes long with no sound. I don't know why. I can't see anything which isn't lit up here. And the monitor is showing sound being recorded right now. So this will be a second attempt and we will end up with another overdub. But it was so detailed, 40 minutes of it, that I couldn't really overdub it. So basically what we've got here, and I don't normally do these, so I don't want them coming in, is one of these Cobra 29 LTD. This is no disrespect to the customer, but these sets are dreadful. But they look swish. They really do look the business. It's a pity they're not the business. Now this gentleman has owned it from new. We don't normally do end users, but you know, I realised he was a bit desperate on this, so we are doing. He sent another set in that we don't normally do as well, which will come to that next set. So this has come in as a dead set but lighting up. So when he turned it on, and we will do now, because I tell you what, it might not work today. That was yesterday. Annoyingly boots up on channel 1. And let's get it to channel 20. But if we go to EU, it still sits there grinning 1 at us. Mind you, there's a very annoying Donita which wraps around. It shows UK channels as 1 to 40, and then, sorry, I'll start again. CPT channels as 1 to 40, and UK channels from 41 to 80, just to confuse matters. So what's that? 59 for a copy, come on, yeah. So I think this is still going to be working, but what we did have it on the aerial. I got as far as that, so I thought we'll plug the aerial in and do a test, and then I said on the video we'll come back to it tomorrow because it's been so involved. And then blow me, when I came to edit kind of part 1 of the video, there was no sound. So the letdown on these, apart from the reliability, is they, to my mind, are a deaf set. And this one's no exception. At least I've had time to ask the customer whether he wants it optimising for all 80 channels, in which case we'd tune it up on channel 1 of UK, or channel 40 of CPD, because it's the same centre of the band, or whether he wants it optimising for UK 40, if that's what he's mainly going to use, in which case that limited sensitivity may as well be had to some advantage on the UK only band. So these are what, 1999, 2001, 2002, and it's the same as that 25. This is the 29, there's a 25 model as well. Then we get that later one in 2014, the black fronted one, which looks like a Cobra, and he's worse. But he's so swish with its functions and its menus and its thingies, but he's as deaf as a post. So this is where we got. We spent a lot of time on this. I think we spent 4 hours on it. It's been to Mr Chippie's bench. It's been under the microscope. We've shown you that before. We have a video microscope, and Mr Chippie found some dry joints in the VCO, and you know, we've got this wax compartment which has a dent in it in this case, and under this shield plate, Mr Chippie found some, with the microscope, some dry joints. And it's caused by 2 things, and one is that they don't clean the components when they fit them. They probably don't think they need to, but you tend to find this is made in the Philippines. You find in a high humidity type of environment that you're going to get some corrosion on the leads of components. So when these are soldered, it's not that the soldering's not done properly, it's that the components weren't cleaned properly. Then you find after a couple of years that you've got this oxidization building up, and eventually that becomes a insulator, and that, hey presto, you've got a dry joint. So it's a matter of sucking the solder off, then cleaning the lead underneath, and then resoldering. It's not just a matter of touching up the soldering, and that's what Mr Chippie has spent some time on, for which in this case there's a £6.50 extra fee. I think he's on £4 an hour, bit like me. So initially, this IC, which is the synthesizer, we love calling these round the corner chips. It's an 80-pin IC. There is glue, which I would think is to stop the crystal moving around, which is 4.5 megs on these radios. And it was oozed all over these pins. Now, this glue can become, there's a word for it, hydro something or other. In other words, if it gets damp in it, it'll harbour that damp and it can become conductive. So I've done my best to use chemical cleaner and to scrape away the glue from the pins in case there's leakage causing this to malfunction. And you don't know, because we actually got it working later on, you don't know whether there's more than one malfunction, and that indeed did help. So we then checked with the portable oscilloscope. I've got that portable oscilloscope, so it was better on the video, and I could see that the oscillator was running. I could see it was adjustable from here, though we can't quite get it onto the full frequency. It's slightly dropped with age, but it's well within tolerance of what is permitted. So that then led us, I then shoved it across to Mr Chippie, and I had an inkling we got a problem with the VCO, because it seemed to be running at this end, and I was right, and he sorted that out. So if we look at what we started off with, because I fixed it, it's coming at 4.5 watts, which I can't allow. It's no advantage. Don't think, oh, I'm going to get. It's no range advantage to you. If it is, we're talking about 10 yards. You've got to double the range. You've got to go to something like 64 watts. So it's ridiculous. And 4 watts is the legal limit. I can have a accepted measuring error of just under 10%, but there's no point thrashing it, because if it's full out, it is going to kill the set, and these sets are unreliable enough at the best of times. The other thing these radios suffer from, which this one won't have, and that is the golden screwdriver messing about with things and making these sets do something they're not supposed to do, and that is usually the ruin of them. There's no service manual we've got available. You can go online and you can find 100 copies of the one for the American version, but not for the UK version. So if anyone's got a circuit diagram, they could email me. That would help people in the future. Now, I've thrown away all our previous notes because I did not want to see these ever again. But I say this customer's asked. So it was a matter of realigning the transmit and then dropping the power. And I think I'm going to check. We're going to check all this again. I think we're there with the power adjustment. So we haven't got as far as doing the deviation. So I couldn't get a frequency as before because I've fiddled with the frequency control in trying to fault find, and the best we can get it to is 27.79095, which is well within what is okay. I'd like it, of course, to be 27.79125, but isn't to be. These are now 20 years old, and clearly they're not intended to last this long. So the sensitivity for 12 dB cyanide, once we got it working, is 1.1 microvolt, and that would be a Maxcom 4E on a bad day. We would reject a Maxcom 4E doing it that bad. Now I have improved it. We're going to do a retune right now. Squelch sensitivity is 1.7 microvolts. It was an incredible 10 millivolts to open. That's silly. And I've now got it to a squelch sensitivity of 1 microvolt, which isn't great. I really want the squelch sensitivity to be something like 0.85 or better. It's got to go around scratchy corner, and this is what was going to be interesting. And I'm really looking forward to this. Is probably going to work fantastic, and everybody's going to say, "Yeah, they're great sets." but they're not. So I've got that set right. When I keyed up, when we got it working, it was full scale deflection. It banged across. We've now got that on 4 watts. And your S meter was 32 microvolts to show S9, and we've realigned that to 100 microvolts. So that's where we've got to. Now, it's enabled me to do one of our black and white pictures. So they are a lot of trouble, but I don't know where my coloured pens are. I must have had a problematic childhood with no coloured pens. Mind you, as soon as I got to 14, any toys I had been given were given away to charity, so that was the end of having Lego bricks or anything like that. So, yeah. So, receive-wise, it's not got that much in it. It seems a rather simplistic receiver. It is crystal filtered, I think. I think that's a crystal filter there. And that is, there's no way to write things on this. DET is that one. Detector. We've got S meter. We've got squelch. Got deviation there, which we've got TX power. Now, being a 2794 license set, they don't have low power. It doesn't say you couldn't have low power, but they didn't do it. That is RF meter. The red pens. And that preset's unknown. I mean, that looks like a modulation transformer. I'll come back to the pens. Right, so we wanted aligning for peak performance on channel 20 of UK, and it's got this. I mean, some people might like this kind of styling, but I just think it's awful. Right, so here goes. Go to align for channel 20 UK. This was out of kilter first time round, and if you've not got the stages lined up between each other, you're going to start having it drawing more current, and you're going to have reliability issues because you've got effectively a bad SWR in between the stages. So let's just bring the power up now to bob on 4 watts. Okay. So I've done that before, but I did it on channel 1 in case you wanted it on 80 channel. So that was kind of our rough tune, just to prove. I think they want you to adjust some of these coils, which isn't good practice, but that's how the manufacturer's done it, if you need to be balancing it. So that's that. I printed off the data sheet for the phase lock loop chip, so I knew which pin to monitor for power and to for the frequency from the reference crystal. So that was part of that. And I made some notes on the back of an envelope. Oh yeah, we've renewed the car insurance for the Nissan Leaf with Sheila's wheels, so this is my pink certificate of insurance. Oh, I had to ring them up for the renewal came through for £50-something more than the previous year, even though I'm a year older Mr Chippie's a year older, the car's a year older, and nobody's done anything wrong. Anyway, I negotiated 50 quid off, so I think it's £1.67 more than the previous year. You shouldn't have to be doing that. It does annoy me. You know, every time these radios come in for service, we're charging what we did in 1994. Oh, it's gone up again. You know, every year, let's put another 19% on. No, I don't think so. Right, so let's have a look where the meter now is. It should be in the centre of the red zone, so we'll just make sure it is. Just like that. Deviation. I don't think it was far out. We'll just finish that off. We want make sure we're tuned for CPT. Sorry, not tuned for CPT. Check the tuning of the equipment. Yep. Oh, it's still on that. It's spot on. Again, I've roughly adjusted it, and it's the preset there. I'll tell you why I couldn't initially check it. We'd got the cover off the screen plate, and there was 2 kilohertz of racket coming through without the screen plate. So I'm going to have to put not available because we're not, or not applicable because we weren't able to read it as it came in. So it's now 2.2 kilohertz to 2.5 absolute peak, which is where it should be. So I'm going to go to CPT channel 1. So this is channel 20 UK. This is channel 40 UK. It's doing 4.1 watt. Just for the reference, channel 1 UK is doing 4.2 watts. And let's go to EU. It's doing 4.4. So that's now within our 10%. So that's our worst case scenario. And to me, that's the worst case scenario because it should be 4. It's difficult to balance these things over 80 channels. Low power it doesn't have, which is disappointing, but that's the way of things, isn't it? I don't know what, I think they've only seen low power on the odd set since 2781 spec was replaced. So that has basically put 40 minutes work into 10 minutes. So we're going to go to channel 20 UK. When the switch decides to work. So that VCO fault was affecting transmit and receive. It was lit up, channel display was on, and nothing else. Does it have PA? Yes, it has, and PA was working. Right, receive. So we're going to now put in 2779. When I get my thing, 2779. Instead of 125, we're going to set it to the frequency the radio is actually on. 790. See what it's on. 095. Because if we aligned it 27.79125, because the radio is very slightly off frequency. So off frequency nobody would notice. It's not off frequency. If I set it, it could be lopsided. So we're going to go through that. I'll put the cyanide meter on. I've done the detector, but I'm going to do the detector again, just in case it's slightly different on this set of channels. Now this has got knobs for knobs. The tone control, which actually works. Oh, it's got a dimmer, and I'll tell you what it does do. It dims the meter and the display, which I'll give it 10 out of 10 for doing that. Doesn't this glow in the dark or something as well? I don't know. Right, detector. Just put a little bit more volume on so we get a sensible trace. So just want to make sure that's absolute peak, and it is. And it wasn't when I first came to it. Okay, so we're going to drop the squelch off. If I can see which knob it is, it's the outer ring of that. It's the concentric. There's a good word for a Monday. So this has been on the bench. This is day 2. We only have so many minute slots between the church pipe organ work, and I try and get a set done in those slots, but this was beyond what can be done in one session. And so Mr Chippie was working on it as well yesterday on his bench. Right, let's go over to the cyanide meter. So as usual, we want it as low as possible, so we're not saturating the receiver and we can see the adjustments. To be honest, I'm going to take this one out. I feel like it would like to be lower, and I'm just wondering, I'm going to put it in the other way. I'm going to drop it in the works. I'm going to switch it off and fish it out of the works. And I know perfectly well if I carry on turning this, it will break. I've now been able to get a peak doing that, so there must have been some speck of dust on it which was stopping it going in. So that's an improvement. It's actually a substantial improvement. We'll drop the attenuator. So I've rough tuned this anyway, and it's vastly better than it was presented as. We've done that, and I think this would be one we need to do with a bigger signal, but I'll just check. Just check it with a bigger signal. Without a circuit, I'm not quite sure of the function of things. Right, okay. So that's where we've now got it. So let's see what that's reading. We've now got 1 microvolt. Now it's still not a good Maxcom 4E standard. Oh, I know what. It's a Uniden needing new capacitor standard. So for 10 dB, we've now got 0.85 microvolts. And if it will do 20, which I think it will, it's still 3 microvolts. But that's down to internal noise from cheap components, and you don't never worry about that. That doesn't affect range. But what we will do, we'll have a listen as to what we can hear down to. So 0.3 of a microvolt. I'll put a different tone on so we can hear that easier. So that's 0.3. I can actually hear that down to 0.12. So it's not deaf, but it's a bit noisier than some sets. But they're not good figures. But they're always like this. Let's go back to the normal tone. There we are. So I'm going to put 100 microvolts on, and I think I've already adjusted the S meter. I have, and it's now spot on the S9. And that was that preset. I'll tell you what, we'll just do it again just to prove it. There we go. Can move that around. Wiggle, wiggle. S9. So once again we're going to check the squelch. So I've put the squelch to full on the radio, and I want it to be able to open when we get to 100 microvolts, the equivalent of S9. So 1, 3, 10, 30, 100, and it opens, because I've already set it previously, and it's the preset there. And then we'll check the sensitivity with you. So I'm going to turn the signal generator to standby. It's parked at 0.3 of a microvolt. Turn the squelch down. I've turned the dynamic down instead. Here we go. It did at least pop in for a split second as the attenuators on the test set came into operation. So let's see where we are. It's 1 microvolt. Yeah, it's exactly what we had yesterday. So that's not changed. Right, well there we are. So that has brought you a nearly hour-long video into whatever this is. And it's survived the night. It's lovely to switch a radio on the next day and it still works. It is when it's one of these. I'll put the soldering iron on, and we'll start putting. There's a lot of screws in these sets. You've got the screws in the back as well as the usual side ones. I think we'll pause the video. I don't think you want to watch me putting 10 screws in. I think the customer was as surprised as I was when I said we've got your set working. Whether or not we say that with his next one is another matter. And his next one, which is tomorrow's, or whenever we can get that onto the next CB set, is a Maycom EM27. And I've never got a non-working one working before, because they've either had battery rot through the multi-layer printed circuit board. It isn't just the front and the back, it has a centre layer like computers do, or they've had the golden screwdriver to turn them into something they're not supposed to be, and it's ruined the set. Now he promised me this. Another set he's owned from new. He promises me that he's owned it from new, so that's great. So it hasn't had the golden wrecking hammer, but he reckons it's the later version. Is that the green one instead of the amber one? In which case it has a memory capacitor instead of a battery. Now if we've got to order a replacement memory capacitor, that's going to put a time on the repair. And I'm going to pause the video while I put all these screws in. Right, so I've put the umpteen screws back in, and as you see it's PR2797. Let's take picture in picture off. Oh, it wasn't on. Huh. That was a fat lot of good then, wasn't it? Another ruined video. Made in Thailand. Right. I wonder what the SWR is on our area. It's usually about 1.8. Let's turn the volume down. So how does this work? That's the dimmer. It's calibration point. It says the SWR is wildly moving. Well, that's unusual. One nano, Roger. Notice how they're distorting because they're over deviating. Somebody talking? I think that's Andy. Let's see if anything's on CPT set of channels, apart from interference. It could have been a conversation on channel 12, but... Okay, so it's working, and I will look forward to doing the on the air test because it'd be nice to see how it performs around Scratchy Corner with it not being as sensitive as most of the sets that we do. So sorry that that's been a bit of a cock up one way and another, but we've done the set. It's had a lot of time put into it, and thank you for watching.